While Sony and Sucker Punch have been pretty quiet on the Ghost of Yotei numbers, we do have figures from Circana, but also insiders. And man oh man, even though it's the holiday season, it looks like Ghost of Yotei sales are falling off already. I have a few different things to show off, but before I get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, join the community in my live streams, and consider supporting through Patreon or YouTube memberships. Now, no matter how well Ghost of Yotei has done so far, I think we all know the fact that if it had been a proper sequel, if it had been Jin Sakai, if it had been more in line with fan expectations, it would have sold way more copies by this point in time, given how popular the first game was. But the sequel turned a lot of people off, not just because of Atsu, it's because of Erika Ishii, it's because of the way the developers acted during the Kirk situation, it's just the fact that they didn't seem to innovate with this game. There's a pile of problems, but a lot of people have purchased it already. We know that it had sold 3.3 million copies in the first month, but it doesn't look like it is holding anymore. It seems like it has significantly slowed down, even though we are talking about the holiday period. It came out in October, which was a prime opportunity for them to sell copies. You have Black Friday, Cyber Monday, sort of that week of sales from different retailers. You have the holidays coming up, so they expect copies to sell then. But now that we are out of November, going into December, it will be curious to see how it sells during this kind of last month period. But we are getting some updates from Mark Curran saying, I have updated info on Ghost of Yotei sales after Black Friday. Now, of course, take everything with a hefty, hearty grain of salt. I think that it is always tough, right, when it comes to charts and insiders, because they can be wrong, they can skew information, like with the Circana charts, for example, when they share information on the best-selling console games or just the best-selling games in, let's say, the United States, they don't take into consideration certain companies' numbers like Nintendo. They don't share Nintendo numbers, and that would paint a very different picture a lot of the time, but we are getting some information here. It says the good news, Yotei has sold over 4 million units, and yeah, in 2 months, that does sound pretty solid. It definitely is a game that made its money back, which ultimately is really what Sony and Sucker Punch care about. I do think, though, that it could have made a lot more money, and it appears that it is dying out much quicker than anticipated, because the bad news is that it is underselling Tsushima by 20%. Reminder, I was dead on accurate with my sources' numbers, proven 100% correct before. I trust these numbers, and if it's at 4 million units in 2 months, but it hit 3.3 million in its first month, right? You have to consider we don't have every single piece of information on November yet, but that would mean that it only sold about 700,000 copies on top of the first month's numbers, which are not good. That is not a good situation for them if they saw that quick of a drop-off. Now, of course, they need games typically to sell 5, 6, 7, 8 million units. With this, if the rumored budget of around $60 million is correct, then they've already made their money back and they can consider this a success and just sort of throw it to the side. Do I think we're going to get another Ghost of Yotei game or just another Ghost game in general? Yes, but it's going to be a longer time period than it was from Tsushima to Yotei, because I think that they sort of want the backlash to die down and they want people to have a fresh look at their new title whenever it comes out. Now, what is so funny about this is, of course, the Access Media and their ilk have been saying, oh, the Chuds were wrong all along, a massive Chud L, the gamers are wrong yet again, which we technically weren't. I have never seen anybody say Ghost of Yotei was not going to sell at all. That is a complete and blatant lie that is being pushed to try to get an own on the individuals that that group of people doesn't like. My estimation was always around like 3 million. I expected that to be the end of the year number, and hey, it did it in the first month, which is really good. But we're still talking about an apparently massive drop off. If again, it's only at 4 million units after hitting 3.3 in the first month. That's not a good look. Maybe because it is the holidays, it will have a boost. But when Ghost of Tsushima had came out, it was in July. It had no major holidays to prop it up, no major sale periods to prop it up, and Ghost of Yotei's release was very intentionally placed towards the end of the year. But after December, the sales are going to completely crash if it is actually already at only 700,000 units sold in a month. And while we've heard Ghost of Yotei has sold pretty good in Japan, it's not as good as the media would like you to believe, because Ghost of Yotei had debuted in first place on the retail charts in Japan with sales of 120,196 units according to Famitsu for the week ending October 5th, 2025. But if we take a peek at what Tsushima's was, it had sold 221,915 copies in its first week, comfortably surpassing the record previously held by Death Stranding, Famitsu reports. So the first week numbers were about half in Japan, and while it has been able to stay in the top charts, I believe it stayed consistently in the top 30 charts, Ghost of Tsushima did as well, so it will be curious to see how that does. But taking to social media, looking at the response to this, there are a lot of gamers just saying it probably would have sold over 10 million if it was the continuation of Jin's story. The Otsu tax is about 20%, I guess. Hope it was worth paying. Sounds like its tail is dropping significantly faster than Tsushima's, despite releasing close to the holidays when it should be longer. And again, we don't have all of the information, and maybe in January we'll hear about October, November, December's total, and it will look really great for them. They've clearly sold a few million copies, but not as much as I would anticipate they expected. We've never heard what like their internal goal was. Typically with companies, it's just to double the budget and then make some on top of that. But with this, who knows? How about this one? I call it bold and brash, more like belongs in the trash. It would have sold 5 million if Atsu was hot or had a male protagonist like Jin. I think regardless of who they chose, if it wasn't Jin, it was going to face problems. It was going to face backlash. Would it have severely affect the sales? Who really knows? Either way, though, this is a game that did have quite a bit of controversy surrounding it, and I do think that that was a problem. Did it turn a lot of people off? No, but there were a lot of people who did also sit on social media and say, enough is enough, I'm not going to support it, and ultimately didn't. Ghost of Tsushima was out of nowhere and did that well as well. If it wasn't for the success of the first game, then it would be doing far worse. 4 million is great for a single player game on only one console. Just platinumed it, and I can honestly say that it is not better than Tsushima. The graphics are better and everything feels smooth, but the story is weaker, and the Ubisoft style activities feel repetitive after a while. So I'll be keeping my eye on this as I have been. It seems that it is doing okay so far, but if this number is true and it has sold at this point only 4 million units, it means that it had a significant drop off in going into the holidays and sort of the prime real estate that it had for a release window. That would be abysmal. But that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. If you enjoyed and found it important and informative, make sure to give it a like, and if you didn't, give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I'll talk to you all again in the next video really soon.